Moses, the greatest prophet and leader in history. This is the story of his life. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. It is now c. 1530 BC. Many generations have lived during the 130 years since Joseph was joined by his brothers and their families at Avaris in Egypt in 1660 BC. The Israelites are now living in slavery under Pharaoh, who did not know who Joseph was. They were forced to build store cities for the Egyptians in the eastern Nile Delta area of the Lower Egypt at Pithom and Ramesses is the later name for the Israel settlement at Avaris, where the new Egyptian capital of Pharaoh Ramesses II was built some 700 years ago after Joseph's death. The Israelites were multiplying and growing stronger each day. The Pharaoh became afraid that the Israelites were going to grow too strong for the Egyptians and defeat them. So the Pharaoh ordered that all the firstborn Hebrew babies would be killed and thrown in the Nile River. But Moses' parents, Jochebed and Amram, hid him for 3 months, then set him afloat on the Nile in a reed basket daubed with pitch. While Pharaoh's daughter came to the Nile to take a bath, her servants walked along the bank of the river. She saw the basket among the papyrus plants and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened the basket, looked at the baby, and saw it was a boy. He was crying, and she felt very sorry for him. Then the baby's sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Should I go get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" She answered yes, so the girl brought the baby's mother. In 1508 BC, as a young man of 20, the prince sees a Hebrew slave beaten by an Egyptian overseer. In anger, Moses kills the Egyptian official. Fearing retribution from the Pharaoh, Moses flees to Midian, near the Gulf of Aqaba. There Moses rescues some shepherdesses and waters their flocks as well. Their father invites Moses, who is clearly a well-educated Egyptian, to stay. So Moses marries one of his daughters, Zipporah, and settles down for the next 40 years to raise a family in exile in Midian. During his 40 years in Midian, Moses learns much about his Jewish ancestors from his father-in-law Jethro, a priest and chieftain of Midian. One day in 1452 BC, when he is 76 years old, Moses is leading his flock of sheep and goats across the semi-arid desert to Mount Horeb, also called Mount Sinai. God speaks to Moses from a burning bush and calls him to rescue his people from Egypt and lead them back to Canaan and the land he promised to Abraham and his descendants. God tells Moses, "After you lead the people out of Egypt, all of you will worship me on this mountain." Moses asked God what he should tell the people if they ask on whose authority he has been sent. God says, "I am who I am. Tell them, I am sent me." Moses traveled back, and with the help of Aaron, his brother, he told the Israelites that God sent him back to save his people. He showed the people miracles that God had told him to show to them, in order that they will believe him. Moses went and talked to Pharaoh, but Pharaoh would not let the Hebrew slaves free. So God had to send plagues on Egypt. Moses showed miracles to Pharaoh, but Pharaoh's magicians could do the same thing. Pharaoh did not let the people go, so God had to bring plagues on Egypt. But Pharaoh still did not let the people go. Finally, after the last and most terrible plague, death of every firstborn, Pharaoh let the Hebrews go. A while after the Israelites had left, God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he started pursuing the Israelites with an army. The Israelites were trapped. The Red Sea was in front of them, and the Egyptian army was behind them. God opened a path through the Red Sea for the people to cross, and he put a pillar of fire between the Israelites and the Egyptian army long enough so that the people could cross. When the Israelites had crossed, God took the fire away, and the army continued pursuing them. When the entire army was in the pass between the walls of water, God closed the water, and the Egyptian army and Pharaoh drowned. God told Moses to build a sanctuary where he can dwell among his people. The Ark of the Covenant, a portable gold-covered wooden chest containing the 2 tablets of stone inscribed with the 10 Commandments, is to rest in the innermost part of the sanctuary. It is to be accompanied by a gold-covered table containing an offering of 12 loaves of unleavened bread, and a gold lampstand with 7 candles, a central candle and those on its 6 branching arms. The tabernacle, a structure of curtains made with the finest linen and most expensive yarns, surrounds the Ark of the Covenant and forms the most holy place at the heart of the tent of meeting, or the tent of the Lord's presence. This outer tent consists of ram skins, with a covering of fine leather made from the hide of sea cows, Dagons. Moses receives further instructions about altars, hand basins, priestly garments, and the consecration of the priests to minister in the tent of meeting. He is told to construct 2 types of altars, a large bronze sacrificial 4-horned altar for burnt offerings, and a smaller 4-horned gold-covered incense altar. for burning fragrant incense every morning. The priests, Aaron and his sons, are to be provided with a bronze washing bowl mounted on a portable bronze laver stand so they can make themselves ceremonially clean when they enter the tabernacle. Their elaborate priestly garments include a linen ephod, a sleeveless top with golden shoulder strips, incorporating onyx gemstones engraved with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel, a gold and linen breastpiece, a woven linen tunic, a blue robe, and embroidered sash and linen turban. In addition, every man aged 20 or over is to pay a tax for the upkeep of the tabernacle. Craftsmen are appointed to construct the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle, and the tent of meeting. The Israelites traveled further until they came to Mount Sinai, where God was waiting to talk to Moses. He stayed on the mountain for 40 days. While he was at Mount Sinai, the Israelites rebelled against Moses. They demanded to worship the ancient gods they left behind in Egypt. So Aaron made a golden image of a young bull, and the people offered sacrifices to it. When Moses returns to the camp with the 2 tablets of stone containing the 10 commandments, he is furious. He smashes the tablets and destroys the golden calves. Then he sends armed Levites into the camp to restore order. God instructs Moses to set off for Canaan, the fertile, promised land flowing with milk and honey. He meets Moses in the tent of meeting. Together with his young assistant Joshua, Moses ascends Mount Sinai again and receives 2 new stone tablets. 14 months after leaving Egypt, the Israelites turn north along the western side of the Gulf of Aqaba and travel from Mount Sinai to the desert of Paran. At Taberah, meaning burning, the people complain, and the Lord sends a fire which destroys part of the camp. The Israelites grumble again about the lack of meat. God hears their complaint, and a flock of quails is blown in from the sea. The place is called Kibroth Hattava. They move on and reach Hazareth. Miriam, Moses' sister, criticizes Moses, and her skin becomes leprous. She is only healed after Moses pleads with God to forgive her. In 1445 BC, the Israelites reach Kadesh Barnea. Moses selects 1 man from each of the 12 tribes to go and explore the promised land of Canaan. Before deciding how to mount a military campaign against the existing inhabitants of Canaan, Moses needs accurate and up-to-date information about the settlements and their fortifications. To gain this vital intelligence, he sent a dozen undercover agents on a 6-week mission in 1445 BC to find details about the defenses of the towns and cities that could become future military targets. So Moses sent 12 spies, including Joshua and Caleb, to explore the whole land of Canaan, from Beersheba to Hebroth in the south, to Dan to Damascus, 150 miles to the north. The spies traveled north secretly for 3 weeks, from the desert of Zin in the south, beyond Beersheba, where Isaac had settled some 300 years earlier in 1730 BC, and on past Shechem, where Jacob had set up an altar and bought the land for a tomb in 1691 BC. From here they continued north to Rehob and Lebo Hamath Pass. In the far north of Canaan, near Damascus, on their way back south, they passed Hebron, where Abraham was buried in Machpelah Cave in 1850 BC, and cut a large cluster of grapes from the valley of Eshcol. Eshcol means cluster, before returning after 40 days to the Israelite camp at Kadesh Oasis in the desert of Paran. The 12 spies report back. The fertile land does indeed flow with milk and honey, but the cities are well fortified and the inhabitants are strong. Only Caleb urges the Israelites to attack and claim the land. The people complain and want to choose another leader and return to Egypt. Joshua and Caleb appeal to the Israelites to trust in God's protection. but the people are ready to rebel. The Lord is angry and declares that not one of them will see the land I promised to their ancestors except Joshua and Caleb. Moses is instructed by God.
Leave tomorrow and follow the desert road towards the Red Sea.
The Israelites are condemned by the Lord to 40 years of wandering as nomadic shepherds in the desert, 1 year for each day that the spies explored the promised land. All the spies who explored Canaan except Caleb and Joshua are struck down with a plague and die. Some of the Israelites change their minds about abandoning the fertile land of Canaan and decide to attack. But the first attempt to invade the promised land fails because the people attack against God's wishes. The Amalekites and Canaanites pursue the defeated Israelites as far as Hormah in southern Canaan. Moses receives more guidance on religious offerings, unintentional sin, and breaking the Sabbath. Criticism of the leadership of Moses comes to a head, and Korah leads a rebellion. He is killed by an earthquake. Other rebels are struck down by a plague. Aaron's staff blossoms and produces almond. This is seen as a sign that God will continue to bless his leadership. Aaron is given instructions about the duties of priests and Levites. Moses and Aaron are given instructions on the water of cleansing used by the Israelites to wash away sins, prepared from the ashes of a red heifer. The Israelites stay at Oasis of Kadesh Barnea for a long time. Although we are accustomed to thinking of the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years, it would have been impossible for about 2 million people to trek continuously across a barren desert. Most of the time, as the journey from Egypt would have been spent watering their flocks at a desert oasis or moving between one oasis and the next. It is highly likely that for most of the next 38 years, the Israelites lived at the large oasis of Kadesh Barnea, where they spread out to neighboring oases to pasture some of their flock. Kadesh Barnea. Kadesh, meaning holy, was an oasis in the desert of Paran, part of the much larger desert of Zin, in the Negev desert. During much of their 40 years of wandering in the desert, the Israelites probably camped at Kadesh Barnea. Barnea means desert of wandering. The exact location of the Kadesh Barnea has been hotly debated for many years. Victorian scholars equated Kadesh with a small spring at Ain Qadis in the Wadi Qadis, situated about 50 miles southwest of Beersheba. Most modern archaeologists, however, believe that Kadesh was located at Ain el-Qadirat, the largest oasis in the northern Negev desert, about 6 miles north of Ain Qadis, near the Egyptian village of Al-Qasima. The narrow Ain el-Qadirat Valley, a seasonal river valley, or wadi, still contains remains of a fortress on a settlement mound, a tell, dating from 1150 BC, 250 years after the Israelites' conquest of Canaan during the time of the Judges. It also has remains of an earlier stone-lined aqueduct leading from the spring itself, where the burnt lime mortar was radiocarbon dated in 2007 and found to date between 1440 BC and 1640 BC, a period which includes the Israelites' arrival at Kadesh Barnea in 1445 BC. Long before the Israelites settled at Kadesh, Abraham lived in this area, following the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Lord appeared to Hagar, Abraham's slave girl, at a well between Kadesh and Bered. After the conquest of Canaan under Joshua, Kadesh was at the southeast border of the land of Judah and was probably fortified at this time to protect Judah's boundary. Modern-day travelers driving through Israel's Negev desert along Route 40 from Beersheba to Eilat cross the Mount Raymond Ridge of the high Negev and descend into the huge crater known as the Maktish Raman, about 15 miles north of Mizraim. A small track leads to the desert oasis of Ein Avdat, in a narrow gorge leading to the Wadi of Zin. Here, travelers can experience similar desert conditions to those encountered by the Israelites when they first arrived at the oasis of Kadesh. Nearly 40 years after leaving Egypt, Moses' sister Miriam dies and is buried at Kadesh Barnea in the desert of Zin. The Israelites become desperately short of water. God told Moses to speak to a rock to bring forth water, but instead Moses strikes the rock twice with Aaron's stick, and water gushes out. So the Lord forbids Moses from entering the promised land, Canaan. The spring at Kadesh is called Meribah, meaning complaining, because the people of Israel complained against the Lord. As the Edomites were descended from Jacob's brother Esau, Moses sends messengers to the king of Edom requesting safe passage through his territory lying to the southeast of Canaan. But the king sends a large and powerful army against the Israelites and will not let them pass through Edom. The only way into the promised land of Canaan is by force of arms. The Israelites leave Kadesh in 1407 BC and travel north towards Canaan, skirting to the west of Edom. At Mount Hor, Aaron dies and is succeeded as chief priest by his son Eleazar. Although it is not on the route between Kadesh and Atharim, as described in the book of Numbers, Mount Hor, where Aaron died, is traditionally identified as Jabal Haran, Mount Aaron, 3 miles west of Petra in Jordan. This remote site, the highest point in the area at 1,350 meters, can be reached by walking along the path through the Wadi Musa, Moses Valley, via the George, the Sik, leading to Petra. As the Israelites come closer to Canaan, the Canaanite king of Arad attacks them in the northern Negev desert on the road to Atharim, and many Israelites are captured and led in captivity north to Arad. So the Israelites attacked and went deep into Canaanite territory to the north. After a fierce struggle, the king of Arad is eventually defeated at Hormah, meaning destruction, near Arad. But the Israelites decide that it would be more prudent to retreat southwards and attack Canaan from the east. Arad was a powerful and long-established Canaanite city-state when the Israelites made their first attempt to march into the Promised Land in 1407 BC, located just to the north of the Negev Desert, some 28 miles east of Beersheba and 15 miles west of the Dead Sea. It formed the most southerly city of Canaan and a fierce obstacle to any new settler. Alerted by his border guards, the king of Arad marched south and captured many Israelites before they got anywhere near the city. But the Israelites later mounted a successful counterattack and were able to take the city, so they retreated south in order to attack Canaan from the east. Visitors to Tel Arad, about 6 miles west of the modern city of Arad, can see an extensive remains of Canaanite lower city, including the city wall, the reconstructed western gate, and partially reconstructed houses. After the conquest of Canaan under Joshua in 1406 BC, Arad became the southernmost city of Israel. The prominent remains of the Israelite fortress on the summit of the citadel date from the time of King Solomon. An Israelite temple with a small Holy of Holies and incense altars for the followers of Yahweh and Asherah demonstrate how the worship of one true God became compromised during the divided monarchy. The temple at Arad was abandoned during religious reforms ushered in by King Josiah. Arad was largely destroyed by the Babylonians prior to the fall of Jerusalem in 587 BC, but it remained inhabited until the Roman Emperor Hadrian expelled its Jewish population in 135 AD. The Israelites turned south from Mount Hor and retraced their steps toward Ezion Geber, the Red Sea, in order to skirt round to the southeast of the kingdom. Many are bitten by poisonous snakes in the south Negev desert. The Lord commands Moses to make up a bronze snake on a pole, and those who are bitten may look up at it and be healed. The bronze snake is revered and later called Nehushtan. Moses died on Mount Nebo at the age of 120, within sight of the Promised Land.